It's well known that I'm more than a bit of a fan of de Havilland's aircraft, and perhaps none more so than this, the de Havilland Mosquito. Over the years I've made many mosquitoes, including the old Matchbox tool, the 1970s Airfix tool, the more recent Tamiya one, and of course the new Airfix one. And so it seems inevitable that when the Photo Reconnaissance 16 version came out, the one you see in front of you, that I would buy that as well. In this video I will make a little comparison to another popular 1/72 Mosquito kit, which is from Tamiya, this one here. My one is a little bit grubby. It was done in the days of brush painting enamel, so it has definitely looked better, but is assembled quite well and is relatively recent, so it seems an obvious comparison. But I also just want to make it very clear that I'm using this Photo Reconnaissance 16 Airfix kit as opposed to this Bomber Mark 16 version. Whilst they assemble in basically the same way, this has a rather irritating historical inaccuracy to do with the bomb bay area. Now, that doesn't affect how buildable the kit is, and probably doesn't bother a lot of people if you're just interested in making a nice model, but it would be wrong of me to suggest that they are exactly the same when there is a historical inaccuracy with this one, which was a little disappointing when I got it, because, as already stated, a bit of a fanboy of the Mosquito. So with that in mind, let's see what happened when I came to build this model, and we'll have a little comparison at the end with the Tamiya one to see how I think this new Airfix tool stacks up. Starting, as I am one to do, with some data. I've put this as a 2021 tool, which is the original Bomber version. This has a new set of parts for the Photo Reconnaissance version, 142 parts in total and 2 decal schemes, both of them blue, with a recommended retail price of $23.99 at time of purchase. Construction begins exactly as you would expect with the interior, and you have this little central column built around the wing spars, and everything is glued onto there, which makes perfect sense. I think it's exactly the same way that Tamiya do it. Everything assembled very, very nicely in this kit. I noticed no flash whatsoever and basically no fit issues. Whilst I would always recommend dry fitting, honestly, if you were lazy and you didn't dry fit in this, I don't think you'd have a problem with it at all. But obviously I would never condone such reckless abandon behaviour. The parts comprise of a little radio set and a few extra sundries. There's not actually that much to this interior. Most of it is moulded, so the actual detail, the end result, I think is very nice, but they've not put a huge lot of parts in. They've done it very, very, I guess, efficiently. That said, the pilot seat, as you can see here, does have to have its sides glued on separately, which I always find a little bit annoying, but I mean, if it's the way you have to do it, it's the way you have to do it. Don't forget with the Photo Reconnaissance version to drill out the holes. So using a drill bit and then opening it up with a file, that is what I did, to ensure that there is somewhere for the camera lens in the aft fuselage on the port side to go. The ones in the bomb bay, or what would ordinarily be a bomb bay, are catered for by the new parts, but this one in the fuselage you have to open up yourself. Nice easy job to do, carefully marked, it's all good. The interior is painted in the standard colour for me, the Hitaka Interior Grey-Green. Now, I have made a point in the past about not being the sort of person to airbrush interiors, because honestly it's not worth the time putting it in an airbrush and other lies I've told myself. I was doing this and another kit at the same time. Both of them are British, therefore both had the same colour, therefore I sprayed them both. It was so much easier. And then this Tamiya XF27 was brush painted as seat covers. I do find the Hitaka paints to be generally my preferred paint of choice or brand of choice for brush painting. The Tamiya one is fine, of course, absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. But through an airbrush, the Hitaka ones can be a little bit difficult to get the consistency right. Although, of course, that is forgetting about Vallejo. So here, Vallejo black is used for anything which needs to be black. This includes the radio sets and like control handles and things like that. And brush painted on. They're actually a brand that make very good paints both ways. I'm not saying that Hitaka aren't good at airbrushing as well, but these paints, even with a bit thinner, they're fine, even if they're the brush painting ones. But anyway, there is a single decal for the instrument panel, which was applied at this stage. I do always apply a little bit of gloss varnish, even when it's the interior like this, just to make sure that it's easy to navigate. Honestly, with an Airfix kit, I don't think you need it, because the Cartograph decals are fine. However, force of habit, anywhere there's going to be a decal, I just brush paint a little bit of gloss varnish on. Now this piece here is included, and I'm extremely grateful it is. As you can see here, it's a jig. This part serves no actual purpose on the finished result. It is there as a jig to aid construction by drilling 3 holes that are there for landing lights. Or marker lights. No, they're marker lights, not landing lights. You know what I mean. You just line it up, as you saw there, with a little slot in the fuselage which is used for something else, another clear part, and then just drill the 3 slots in, the 3 holes. Again, just tied it up with a file. My one wash to solve all washes is then cracked out. This is the contrast paint from Citadel, the Basilisk's Anus or whatever. I don't care. I don't wargame or whatever. That is watered down. It's already pretty thin, but it's watered down and just painted over everything. This gives a really nice texture. It doesn't make things look overly done. It just makes it look textured. It's a texture paint. It's just texture. It's texture. Anyway, swiftly moving on, the finished result of the interior, or the cockpit area of the interior, looks something along the lines of this. I quite like the fact that the nose glazing goes in last. It means I don't have to mask anything. And I particularly like the incredibly satisfying feeling of sliding the fuselage over the wing spars. I've always enjoyed it when a model does that. Anyway, now it's time for a quick coffee break. Oh, and look at this perfectly appropriate mug that I happened to pick up from the de Havilland Museum. Ooh, well, wouldn't you like to go and see the Mosquito prototype? And that product placement has nothing to do with the de Havilland Museum, who, I'm not sure, probably don't endorse this video. If anyone associated with that museum does watch this, then please reach out. I think your museum is fantastic, but they didn't ask me to do that, and I genuinely just use that mug all the time because I like it. Anyway, moving on, swifter than a mosquito on a photo reconnaissance run over Germany, we have the fuselage halves together, and then this little part here, which again I'm guessing is for a camera. No, it's not. It's the access hatch. It's the way into the cockpit. That's what it is. Yes, and this is one of the few parts which I think does look a bit weird, because inside there is just a solid green slab, so you can look through the beautifully crisp glazing and see nothing. I then moved on to the tail, which is a top and bottom piece for the horizontal surfaces, as well as the rudder, which is a single piece. There are no provisions in this kit to angle the rudder particularly. You could kind of turn it a little bit, but it's certainly not designed for that, so the expectation is to keep it straight. And the same, by the way, for the horizontal tail surfaces. The elevators are fixed as well. I did go slightly rogue from the order in the instructions by sticking this bit on here, which is the cover instead of the bomb bay. I wanted to have the entire fuselage together prior to painting. It was instead suggesting that I would do that right at the end, but I couldn't really work out what the benefit of that was. There are landing lights in both wings. Don't forget to glue these parts in before you stick the top and the bottom of the wing together, because if you forget, you got a hole. And then you're going to have to fill the hole with something clear, and it's a pain. So I painted a little bit of silver and then stuck the clear parts in before then top and bottom of the wing goes together. Once again, we see evidence of this kit being designed by a model maker rather than a model designer. You are using the undercarriage as a jig rather than gluing it in. You are assembling it to make sure that it is straight using the parts unglued, basically. So the Tamiya one, for example, I double-checked the instructions, gets you to stick the the nacelles, the engine nacelles together, and then assemble the undercarriage. Here it tells you to assemble the undercarriage using these holes as a guide to get it straight, then take them out, then do the nacelles, and then afterwards assemble the undercarriage. I think that is fantastic. That is one of the best features of this kit. Now, why is it necessary? Well, the undercarriage isn't at a right angle. It isn't perpendicular from the wing because the wing is at an angle itself. Therefore, there is a slight angle on the undercarriage, and you want to get it straight to stand up properly. Therefore, using these holes, being able to line it up without the nacelles in the way is incredibly helpful, and just fantastic. This right here is already a step above so many other kits, and I cannot stress enough how much I like having things like that included. The pieces themselves are then put to one side where they will be used later, and we have the wingtips, which are clear parts with P and S moulded into those little tabs. P for port, S for starboard. It makes it as simple as possible for the model maker to get them the right way round. Fantastic, really well designed. The exhausts are a bit of a pain because they're in two parts. They're very small, they're very fiddly, but again, there are really clear instructions included. They have arrows which clearly show which way they're supposed to be, up, forwards, or top and forwards. You don't have to guess which way the exhausts go. You don't have to work it out yourself. You can just read the instructions and everything fits together beautifully. The order of the instructions at this point is actually focusing entirely on one wing and then entirely on the other wing. That includes nacelles, undercarriage, everything. It does the entire thing, and then it swaps to the other side. Partly, I think the reason for that is because parts are very similar from the port and starboard side, but in reverse. And if you try to assemble these the wrong way round, you would have a very odd fitting aircraft afterwards. So it's trying to minimise that risk. They're also on completely different sprues. So you have one side, the port side, on one sprue, the starboard side on the other. So again, very, very well thought out, very good part placement, and overall, just a joy to build at this point, because it's not, I'm not going to say it's not simple, it's not complicated, it's just a lot of parts and you need to follow the instructions. And again, here we have the radiator, the cosmetic part at the front of the radiator. It slides in and it tells you, and it makes it very, very clear in the instructions how you do that. You've got the lines, you've got the arrows, slide it in, very, very satisfying. And so at this stage we have a pile of components that just need to be glued together. So the nacelles go onto the wings. The wings can then slide over the spars for a snug fit onto the fuselage, and then some final components can be fitted. This particular version of the Mosquito has a solid part over the landing light. Now, I don't know why they couldn't just give you the normal landing light and tell you to paint over it, but for whatever reason they don't. So they give you a separate part to glue as a little filler over the starboard wing. And we now get to the point where we are ready for painting. So things like the cockpit and nose are plugged with some plasticine or some foam or something like that, and some tape, and painting begins. The entire aircraft was primed in just a white rattle can, and then we have this Model Air yellow, which according to Vallejo is good for US Navy colours, RLM colours, and British trainer yellow as well. I certainly don't know any better, and it's as good a colour as any, so loaded into the airbrush and sprayed onto the spinners. The main body, however, is going to be this Hataka Pru Blue, which came with a paint set that I bought some time ago. As I've already mentioned, these are not necessarily the best when going through an airbrush, because these are meant for brush painting, but I used the associated Hataka acrylic thinner, got it to a reasonable consistency that I felt was about right, and then just vaguely mottled it on. I know I'm not the best at airbrushing, and this is a relatively new skill that I've picked up, but I quite like the result. I think it looks quite good. Next, we move on to the invasion stripes. Now, this aircraft has them around the fuselage only, and does not include them in the decal sheet. Personally, I prefer painting them on, although I did make a slight miscalculation. I'm used to smaller aircraft which have 6mm D-Day stripes, which means it's one layer of tape, whereas here the larger ones that you'd see on medium-sized aircraft like this are 8.4mm. And do you know how hard it is to measure out 8.4mm? Too hard. That's why I measured it as 8.5 because that's close enough. As you saw, the aircraft was primed in white, and I just covered up that area. Once this has been taped, it can then be painted black, just using the same Hataka black as before. I did go over the white again. I would rather have an insignia white rather than the prime white. I've forgotten who it is. Halford. It's Halford's primer white. That's what it is. However, I like brush painting the stripes on because I feel that it gives you a more appropriate texture. That's the theme of this video, apparently, texture. But you know what I mean, they were brush painted on, often with brooms, with rags, with anything that could be found. These were not precise things, and I don't want them to look too precise. So by using the white that I'm using here, the insignia white, as well as that black brush painted, it gives it a slightly different look and a different feel to the rest of the aircraft, and therefore is good, in my opinion. Your opinion may vary. Once painted, everything was given a coat of Vallejo gloss varnish, again just thinned with some Vallejo thinner, and the decals can be applied. The tail stripes are done one piece per side, so you have red stripes and you have to paint the tail white. This is not the primer white. I did go over this with, I believe it was the same insignia white, but looking at it, the colour is slightly different. So apparently I have another white in my collection that I wasn't aware of. The registration can then be applied, and it has a blue backing already included. Now, this, I assume, is colour matched to the paint that Airfix recommends, which is one of their own, one of the Humbrol brand. It's not quite the same shade. I would rather they didn't put their own body colour, their final colour on decals like that. However, the end result is not noticeable enough for it to be an issue. It's a little bit different. People are going to want to use their own brand of paint. They're going to want to do their own thing, and it's a bit annoying doing it like that, but it is considerably easier than having to mask some of those panels. So I absolutely understand why they did it, although it's one thing which I think could be a little bit better thought out. But all in all, the decals were absolutely fine. They're cartograph. You kind of expect them to be good, and they were. Now, a quick note about the canopy. The instructions give you a little bit of historical referencing. So this should be a pressurised canopy because it's a photo reconnaissance high-altitude aircraft. However, these blisters that you see, one on each side and one on the top of the canopy, you would expect on the bomber variant, and in fact both are provided in the kit. The American option, the other decal scheme, has flat canopy, and this one has the blisters, but it gives you the historical references saying that whilst you would expect it to be the other one, photos show that this aircraft had blisters. I did indeed do a quick Google search and looked for images of this squadron, which is actually a South African squadron, and yeah, I agree. I can find pictures of blisters on the canopies for whatever reason. So thank you very much for Airfix doing that research. It did make me wonder, but hey, I have independently verified via a quick search that what you've said seems to be correct. And so the build enters the final stages as we get the undercarriage parts that we put to one side earlier. We're adding the wheels to them, so again, just gluing the two halves of the wheels together, and then you have separate hubs. These tyres are weighted, so they are modelled with a bulge, which is there to represent the area where the tyre is being compressed by the weight of the aircraft touching the ground. I like when companies do this because round wheels just don't look right for a heavy aircraft, potentially one with a heavy load like a bomber. I know this is a photo reconnaissance one, but still, it wouldn't be round. It would be like this. It would be like this. Airfix have done a good job. Anyway, I did have a little bit of difficulty getting the wheel in. You sort of have to pry the legs apart a little bit and then fit the wheel in. The advantage with that is you can then sit the aircraft on its wheels and line the bulges up in the right manner rather than having to glue it in like with a lug and make sure that it sits at the angle that they want. So they've done the right thing. Again, very well thought out kit. And then with undercarriage bay doors and the spinners glued on, I'm calling this one pretty much done. And we're going to now go and have a look at the final product and my final thoughts. Oh, and actually, I'm quickly going to mention that one thing I didn't film but should have done is I put the radio antenna wire using some AK elastic. For some reason, I didn't film it. I just decided to add it. Never done it before, never used that product before, but you'll see in the end result that it's got an antenna wire. That's what it is. Just thought I'd clarify. Putting my horrific bias for de Havilland aircraft aside for a minute, what do I think of this as a kit? Well, it's really easy to assemble. I had no fit issues whatsoever. Everything seems really well thought out because it's also really well designed. It's also got these little extras like the jigs that are included to really help you. If you're not familiar with drilling holes, if you don't like drilling holes, fine. You don't have to guess. It tells you where to put it. It has been absolutely beautiful to build, and I don't think I can find a fault with it. Having some of the decals with the body colour, which I assume is colour matched to Humbrol 230, I thought was going to annoy me more than it actually did. But judge for yourself. This is the end result. Given that this is 1/72nd scale and we're talking, a centimetre or so, I don't think it's a problem at all. And I also just wanted to say a quick word about the tail decal. In the unboxing, I suggested that there was a blemish. It looked like there was a little bit missing from the stripe, which I thought was unusual. Thank you to whoever it was in the comments that pointed out it's not a blemish. They've just shaped it around the antenna or whatever that is on the tail. You're absolutely correct. Yeah, it was absolutely perfect. I did try and colour match it, but I don't have a red quite that exact shade. But hey, again, close enough. And so finally we come to everyone's favourite pet brand, Tamiya, and their Mosquito. The Tamiya tooling dates back to 1999 and represents earlier versions of Mosquito. Easiest way of telling is this has an angled windscreen and the Tamiya ones have a flat windscreen. So whether it's the Night Fighter 2, the Bomber Mark 4 or the Fighter Bomber 6 or the other ones that they do, they generally all have that flat front because they're earlier marks. Now, the price of the Tamiya one fluctuates a little bit, I guess because they're imported, but you can pick them up for under 20 quid. And this, at time of recording, bearing in mind that I know Airfix are about to announce new prices and this will go up, this at 24 puts it as a little bit more expensive than Tamiya. Is it worth a little bit more than Tamiya? That's a very difficult question to answer. The Tamiya one is beautiful. It is a really, really nice kit. There are a couple of different ways of doing things. So the way the nacelles go on is slightly different, and they don't give you the jigs, of course. But overall, they are very, very similar in terms of level of enjoyment. I would say that the Airfix one is better for a beginner, somebody that is not as experienced with modelling or has just been making much smaller, simpler, older aircraft. I feel that this is a tooling that people should try and would almost certainly enjoy. However, the Mosquito fan in me is bursting to tell you that what I think you should do is buy at least one of each. Buy the photo reconnaissance one from Airfix, buy the Fighter Bomber Mark 6, which I think is one of the most beautiful aircraft ever built, buy that from Tamiya and just try for yourself. They are two different but equally beautiful renditions of a fantastic aircraft. So if you want a Mosquito and you don't know which one to go for whichever one you are prepared to buy. Preferably both of them. In fact, realistically, because the Mosquito was such a versatile aircraft, you absolutely have to have a fighter version and a bomber version and a photo reconnaissance version. You need at least 3. So, why not just buy all of them? Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment in the video as to whether you also agree that the Mosquito is possibly the greatest aircraft to ever grace the skies, or if you're a filthy heathen that doesn't really like it very much. Also, have you made this kit? What did you think? Do you prefer the Tamiya one? Do you want me to buy another Tamiya one? Because if you do, in addition to liking and subscribing and supporting the channel that way, you could become a channel member and provide direct, regular support to the channel and help me fund my de Havilland addiction like these wonderful people on screen do. Anyway, that's enough rambling for today. I have a brand new model of a Photo Reconnaissance Mark 16 Mosquito to stare at until, probably until the other half comes in and starts telling me dinner's ready or something. I don't know. I could be here for days. Bye.